Welcome back to Naturally Better TV. I'm Dr. Jeremy, and again, I have just a fantastic show lined up for you today. To be honest with you, the two people that I've got joining me today, we've already been talking nearly an hour before we started, and I'm quite confident we could talk all day. But what we're going to do today is we're going to try and just get some foundational stuff across of what these brilliant people have done and what they're involved in. And so what I'm going to do, normally I talk a little bit about my guests, but these people are so extraordinary, I want them to talk about themselves. And so let me introduce you first to the wonderful Salini, Teri, Apodaca. Salini, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and you said it perfectly.
Thank you. You briefed me and I got away with it. Also, welcome to the show, Gus Molina, a water expert, a man after my own heart. And again, we could talk all day with Gus, but hopefully we're going to go through their journeys. Everyone's been on a journey to get here and then bring in what water really is in a condensed view, ready for longer shows. But Gus, welcome, my friend, to the show.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jeremy. I'm very honored to be here. Very honored.
Well, you know, I can tell the listeners that Gus it's something like 3 o'clock in the morning, so the dedication to do these shows, I'm very humbled and I'm the one who's honored, so thank you very much. If you don't mind, I'd like to start with Salini. Salini, would you be so kind to give the viewers some background into your journey and your story in a way that you can, please?
Absolutely, Dr. Jeremy, be happy to. There's just a lot to say, so I'll try to put it in a nutshell. I had a dual initiation into light and dark as a child. My mother was a fantastic healer and a spiritual visionary, and she taught me about many, many different faiths and took me into a lot of initiations and training with very famous healers. And we spent time with Alan Watts, if you remember him. And I was trained in Reiki by the Reiki Grand Master Hawayo Takata for 20 years. And that started when I was a child. So I was already practicing healing by the time I was 5 years old. So I had that training, and I received a lot of healing treatments from these people. And I was taught to meditate and all those things. And that was my light initiation. On the other side, my father was a Mason, and he was involved in sex trafficking and pedophilia. And he took me into the MK Ultra Mind Control Sex Slave Program, where I went through several years of sex slavery with the Masons, where they took me into this special program. It's called the Sex Kitten Program, but it was also a program for children with advanced IQs, because I tested with a very high IQ. So they were considering using me for the NASA programs of like remote viewing and things like that. And I went through many years of training in mental programming and how to have advanced memorization, advanced calculation abilities and things like that. And some of those things actually helped me. But obviously the trauma-based mind control was not a happy experience. That was only in the very early part of my childhood, and then the rest of my childhood was healing, was all healing. And by the time I was 18, I was initiated as a healer and began my healing career. So from there, I went on into college. I went to university, 2 universities where I studied psychology, holistic health, and chemical dependency. And then I also had a non-traditional education, Dr. Jeremy, where I studied shamanism with the Hopis, the Navajos, and with the Mexican brujos and curanderas. And I learned various forms of body work, acupressure, general massage techniques, chronic healing, psychic and intuition, things like that, to assist with deeper techniques in healing people. So over the course of my life, I perfected these techniques and used them on myself to deprogram and heal myself, Dr. Jeremy. And that's how I developed my program that I just wrote down in my book, Emerging from the Matrix, that I use to deprogram and heal people from everything. It doesn't have to be what I went through, but from the just toxic world that we live in, you know, the cultural trauma of living on this planet in low conditioning, low consciousness, the toxic mental state, the toxic emotional state, and the toxic physical state that we're all struggling with, that I had to completely purify myself from. So that's the program I developed, and that's partially how I got started. I also, both of my children fell sick when they were very young, and the doctors almost killed them off. So that got me going on holistic healing very strongly. Especially my baby daughter almost died when they told me that she had leukemia or cystic fibrosis. And I kept saying, I think she just has food allergies. And sure enough, I was right, but $100,000 later, and the doctors could never figure it out, I saved her life. So my life was jump-started into healing right from day one, to answer your question.
And beautifully answered. People who watch my shows and follow my work and our broadcasts and who are aware of the Naturally Better Hospital project. I don't like the word hospital. It's actually a healing project, but I've used hospital and I'm broadcasting because people understand what we're talking about. They're aware that if they've looked at the documents and they've looked at the background of this project, will know that I talk about that dis-ease is, whether diagnosed or not, is exactly that. It is dis-ease. And what makes Naturally Better different and is the philosophy. And the philosophy is we're not here to get slaves, program robots, which most people don't know they are yet, in the mass mind control, which I want to just talk about in a minute. We're not here to make the slaves healthier and then put them back to be slaves. So Salini has mentioned MK Ultra and trauma-based mind control, which I'm acutely aware of. But for viewers who are sort of sitting there right now going, what the hell? What you need to understand is there is not only this nefarious practice, which is horrific at every level once you research it, and I'll do a whole show with Salini if she's willing another day, which is individual trauma-based mind controlling, where they split and compartmentalize the brain and create numerous personalities. And so the human beings aren't even aware that they're having different lives and different experiences until later on, and their mind starts to come back together. But more insidious, if that's okay to use that term, is what I call mass mind control. And the mass mind control, and the big red flag for mass mind control, is repetition. And people listening to this show, whether you're aware of it or not at this stage, depending on your consciousness and awareness, is you've been born into a system that has been constructed to be repetitive until you just become a little robot, Monday to Friday, la 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 la, and so on and so on. That, in its very nature, is the beginning of dis-ease. And so, absolutely, because when my wife, who I talk about a lot, and I want to get over the Gus in a minute, but my wife I talk about a lot. My wife is a wonderful, wonderful woman who was diagnosed terminally ill 6 years ago before I met her. And she was doing very well as a robot until she got terminally ill. And she's gone through her healing process, a lot she did before meeting me and then a lot with me. And now she's truly in her own space. And she's an artist, and she's being an artist, where she was working with corporate government before in Canada. But one of the key things that's happened to Natalie is that she says, people no longer know where I am during the day. 7, 8 years ago, you could look at your watch and you know exactly where Natalie would be. The family, the friends, you know exactly where she was, exactly what she's doing, and this is the level of conditioning. So what I wanted to bring back to you quickly, Salini, before we just bring Gus in a little bit, is you recognize that greater truth, that true medicine, true natural medicine, is not just about making robots, when you realize you're a program robot going through routine, it's not just getting them healthier and putting them back into the system. It is about awakening their consciousness to all levels of truth. Would you agree with that, Salini?
I couldn't agree more, Dr. Jeremy. What I'd like to add about that is that I figured it out very young that we were living in some kind of a strange system where nobody knew what the truth was and that people were sleepwalking, but I didn't really have a word for it until later. And then one day I named it the collective traumatic trance. And that's what I call it in my book, Emerging from the Matrix. I have a glossary of terms in the back, and these terms I created are new terms that I want people to learn, because we need to break the mental conditioning, the verbal conditioning, the language conditioning, the mental conditioning, the emotional conditioning, which suppresses our divine power. And what I consider to be a great gift in my life was the fact that I had this dual initiation, which the divine healing ended up healing the mind control program that was given to me. It broke the programming, Dr. Jeremy. And that's what I really want to share with your audience tonight, is how powerful our Creator's divine energy is to heal a damaged mind, a compartmentalized mind, and a soul that's been crushed and diminished. Because I was nearly dead and gone. I had 4 near-death experiences. And here I am, bright and healthy today. So I totally agree with you, 100%.
Sorry, I couldn't hit my mic then. Yeah, I'm glad. Of course, I knew you would, but what viewers need to grasp is when you're at the coal face, so to speak, of helping people, and you've been through this awakening, this consciousness, you've been fortunate, and it is fortunate to have been led, and it is led, to the knowledge to see the level of deceit on this planet, which is now, make no mistake about it, imploding because of the frequencies that are now hitting this dimension. The light is coming through, and the light exposes the darkness. So we are very much in the midst of this massive awakening. But when you work with people and they come into your clinic or wherever it is, you are very frequently seeing far more than they understand at that point. And our job is to help them through a pathway to see it for themselves. And, Natalie was almost going to come on the show. I wish she had done this time. Because once your life's, let alone, the bigger picture, you can't put that genie back in the box. You can't unsee it. And so we'll come back to you, Salini, in a little bit. Now, I am extremely grateful, Gus, that you have gotten up at such an ungodly hour to come and talk to me. I feel very, very humbled by it. Gus, would you do me the great pleasure of sharing your story of how you've got to where you are today? I know we could talk all day with Gus, but do your best, my friend.
Okay. I was born into a family with 2 generations of spiritual acknowledgements, both on my mother's side and on my father's side. And one of the most inspiring memories, well, I don't have it as a memory, it's a story that my mother told me, was that they used to implement purified vibration on me when I was in my cot as a baby. And then I used to mimic it and murmur the names in a baby's tone. All right. And that's where it all began. When I was 13 years old, I had a spiritual awakening, and my mother became my first teacher. All right. From then, I continued to expand. At the same time, I became a prized athlete. High school, a gold medalist, and a soccer player, because I am from Argentina. My father was a famous soccer player in Argentina, and he was my best friend. He's always been my best friend. He showed me how to behave with my sister and with my mother. I had a little bit of difficulty with my mother. We were always at each other. So he always showed me how to have respect for my mother and my sister. And that benefited me further on in the future. When I finished high school, around the age of 20, because I had moved from my neighborhood into not far from the neighborhood, a couple of suburbs away, over a street that's called Canterbury Road here in Sydney. And when I was 17, I noticed that there was women standing on the corner. So the first thing that came to mind, obviously, was what can I do to help? What is it that I could do? Meanwhile, I was developing a lot spiritually and gaining a lot of, well, my mum was like a form of library. She had a lot of books lying around the house. I used to take the books, read them at night, read them on the bus, and I learned a lot of beautiful things. You know, I wish the whole world was with me when I had those experiences. I've been exposed to some beautiful moments that I could shout from the highest mountain and tell the whole world. Sometimes I feel like that. It's so emotional. So that kind of drive that I had in me moved me towards that. When my father, when I turned 20, I received my license, and my dad lent me his car. So then I started going out venturing and approaching these girls, picking them up, putting them in the car, and letting them know that, listen, I don't want to do anything with you. I just want to talk. You know, and I got to know them. The church people were, well, to me, they were a benefit, because they showed me how to approach the girls, how to be with them, how to be compassionate to them. All right, it was a little bit of training for me, although I saw that there was no result. The church people had no result. The police had no answer. You know, jail is no answer. So, and also the doctors, all right, the ones that were prescribing at the drug clinics that medication, methadone and buprenorphine. I found that was no answer either. All right, there's a lot involved there. So I started to implement what I know towards them, and it was not easy to like find a way to be peaceful with them, because they were always on the run. They were always living in the fast lane. So I'd wait patiently, and the opportunity will arise somewhere in the dark. And all I needed was 10 to 15 minutes. I started to grow in momentum. As I grew up, and my spiritual acknowledgement became more clear and more advanced, more evolved.
I'm not sure if Gus is frozen there and is going to come back, but are you still there, Gus? Yeah, I've got him back. Can you just froze there a second, Gus, so yeah. Put your mic back on and keep going where you were going from. You were doing great.
You can hear me? Okay. Well, where was I? All right. Well, it got a little further. I found that when I was going through a difficult period, my best work was out on the street. You know, I was able to provide more. It's like when you're feeling heartbreak and everything, the best in you comes out. You know, and so yeah, as I was growing and maturing, I was becoming more of a mastering what I was doing, because I found that nobody else was doing it. My intuition is very wide. I mean, I could go as far as saying I have a universal consciousness. So I'm able to, I'm a macro thinker, being an Aquarian, born an Aquarian, we are macro thinkers, all right? All right, understand that Aquarians, we're macro thinkers. So I was able to use my intuition and the guides that I have with me that protected me. And that's what the light is. Like most people talk about, I'm a light worker, I'm a light worker. But what kind of light are you talking about? Your spirit is not of light, or else you wouldn't be existing in duality in this mode. You would have transcended from reincarnation and being in the spiritual realms by now. That is a light, a spirit with light. So I carried some spirits with light with me. Later on, I call that my career. My real job was out on the street. Even though I'm a welder and metal fabrication engineer, I class this as my real job. All right. So when I developed a little further, I started to see some transformations in these girls. They started to become desperate. I was on call all the time because I could manage to get them off the medication that they were also being placed in. I call the doctors Nazi drug dealers in white coats because that's what they do.
Because you're right.
Yeah, they make a profit from opposed to the drug dealer. Instead of the drug dealer, they're making a profit. You know,
yeah.
So that's not good. I see their attitude. I can read right through them. I can see right through their eyes. You know, and I didn't find anything that was still suffering. There's also a lot of side effects, especially with methadone. So I learned a lot of things. And one thing, towards the end of my long-term career, because I was out for 2 decades on the street, a little more, the Afghan war began. And there was a lot of people dropping on the street because it was very strong. They call it the yellow Afghan drug. You know.
So you're referring, of course, to heroin.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I specialize in that area. Mm-hmm. So I started to use water because I had learned how to purify water spiritually. And when I was able to do that, I'd go out on the street because I had a tendency, I had an ability to make them laugh. Go out on the street and be a beautiful comedian with them, you know, and that's what they needed because they don't smile. You know, they're so distraught, they're so depressed, and that it moves them further towards. It's like a cycle they can't get out of because of the depression. They take the drug, and so on, and it just continues every day, day by day. Early in the morning, they all have nightmares, and I found out later on, after I was doing something, after 2 decades, I found out that heroin is 90% spiritual. So when you realize something like that, you know that you're in the right place. And I managed to form a physical transformation overnight. You could see that their hair changed, the way that they dressed, the shape of their face, the tone of their voice, their posture, everything. They went back into being little girls again, all right, and pretty beautiful once again, you know, and that's a physical transformation, right? That is something that the doctors can't manage to do. So,
may I add something to that, Gus, if that's all right? If you just mute your mic there, I just want to add something to that. People, I was in New Zealand for 10 years, and before I needed to leave, and in the end I had to leave because I was starting to upset quite a lot of people that didn't want me to be upsetting them. Once I left, I discovered, I'd already heard about it, but I discovered that it was been well documented that heroin and other drugs had been deliberately let into. I mean, I knew this research already by then, but I specific research that heroin had been specifically allowed to come into the country via the Prime Minister who was most revered in average New Zealanders' mind. And it went to the mobs, what we call the mobs, and which is why they protected and it was freely distributed, because this war on drugs is nothing other than how many drugs they could sell, and it's very important to make people ever toxic as we approach this time. And when you use, you bring in the Afghan war, what people need to realize, if they're unaware of some of these things that we're saying, that they're deliberate, which is why society is in disease. These things have been deliberately come into these countries. It's not some black shady drug dealer or Mexican dude over here trying to smuggle it in. They're coming through the ports, my friends. They're coming in under security guard. They're coming to these countries with a very deliberate intent to poison the people. Otherwise, the people will wake up and see what's going on. Now, in Afghan, I think it was something like, not that I'm supporting the Taliban or anything like that, but when the Taliban were in control of Afghanistan, the Afghanistan before the Taliban were producing something like 90% of the world's heroin. And the Taliban came in and it went down to something like 10% or some ridiculously small amount. Well, that's not acceptable. So the Americans came in and basically came in to open up the channels of heroin again. As soon as the Americans came in, the industrial military complex, the production, and this is their own figures, by the way, the production coming out of Afghanistan went back up to 95%. Now, if anyone's watching this and goes, oh, just come on, I give this to you before I give it back to Gus, right? You know, if anyone's saying, oh, come on, that's just ridiculous. You know, the government friggin' bringing in the drugs and going on with it. Well, I give you this, okay? If there's a war on drugs, as you've been told, and they really are after stopping it, they'll tell you they have satellites so advanced that they can read what newspaper you're reading. Now, people know this, Google Earth and all this other stuff, which is another subject another day, how real and accurate that is. But nonetheless, people will accept the satellites. Now, I happen to know, because I've treated rural people, that in England, they can take satellite pictures of what crop you're growing so that they can send you the bill, because they tax you on what crops you're growing in the UK. Do you think they could find poppy fields in Afghanistan producing 90% of the world's heroin with satellites? Of course they bloody can. And if they could find these poppy fields, do you think they could wipe them out in a weekend with their Agent Orange and all the other stuff? Of course they can. Why aren't they? Because this is deliberately protected to get into and down to these people that Gus and Salini have been helping, the most vulnerable. So I hand it back to you, Gus. I'm sure you agree with those points I just wanted to raise, do you?
Well, what happened in Afghanistan is the CIA military special forces were guarding the poppy fields, right? Because the poppy fields, well, the poppy plant takes 10 years to mature. That's how long the war was for. You know, that is very obvious there. Another thing that I wanted to add is that they're very economical. What happens is they manage to do a drug bust. For example, the police do a drug bust, and then the drugs are out. You think that the drugs are going off the street, but then they go back in, which means the police is involved in the drug trade as well. They're making their profit there, all right? So it's all corrupt. It's very, very dirty. It's very evil. And
it's all dirty. And those who are watching the television and hopefully now starting to watch NBTV and similar things, if you're still watching the television, you'll see why this is probably the most significant mind control piece of technology on the planet, because all of us, until we woke up and went through our own stories and our own learnings, believed what we saw on TV. So when Gus sits here sharing some of his first-hand experience, he's absolutely telling the truth. It's rotten to the core. And when we say the work we all do together is to wake people up to see, because once we see, no one likes a liar. We hate a liar. But when you don't know you're being lied to and you believe it's the truth, you can't do much about it. So, Gus, I take my hat off completely to you for many reasons. But one of the reasons is, and I want to just come back to Salini, is because you said at 18, you started to see these women of the night that you call them, or women of the dark, or what have you, and you use the word. So obviously, I wanted to help them. That is absolutely not the norm in a drugged up, poison, toxic society. The norm is to ignore them and to defile them further as human beings and call them names that allow you to feel better about yourself and worse about them, of course, if you're using them for their services. But what I wanted to switch over to Salini, if you don't mind, because we've only got a certain amount of time in this show, is I believe you've had involvements with similar types of people and addictions. These people, particularly with sex involved, there are energies and entities that can attach themselves, multiple. Can you give me any experience on what you've come across helping such people, Salini?
Yes, absolutely. And I just wanted to make a quick shout out to Gus from what you just said, is that it's not that common for a man to be willing to do something like that for women on the street. And Gus is one of the most compassionate people I've ever met in my life. So I tip my hat to him for that same reason. Having been sexually, I wish Gus had been there to save my life. You know, there wasn't anybody. There was no police at my door. So what happened to me is I grew a very large, compassionate heart because I suffered a lot, Dr. Jeremy. So by the time I got finished my schooling and started counseling, yes, now repeat the question. I'm sorry. What was the question exactly? You wanted to know if I had the same experience as Gus? Is that what you said?
I believe that since you've been through those experiences and started helping people, you would have been involved with similar people to Gus. And and I'm aware that particularly if you have multiple sexual partners, particularly if you've been in prostitution, that there are entities and energies that and the drugs go hand in hand with lowering that frequency to allow those other entities to attach. So I wanted to know what your experience of that, because some people will be watching already going, what do you mean the drugs are being brought in by the military? And they're still phased on that, but I want to know what your experiences are.
Okay, well, I have several important comments to make about that, very clear comments. First of all, if you're addicted, you are already attached to entities. The entity attachment issue is universal among addicts. And secondly, if you're an addict, you've had some form of trauma, sexual, physical, mental, psychological trauma, because the trauma breaks your aura to the point where you are susceptible to wanting to use a substance to numb your pain. And then that in turn leads to entity attachment. So, you know, because of my, as I mentioned, my dual initiation, I'm a very spiritual person. So I had already become a Reiki master and all that stuff before I even became a drug and alcohol counselor. So my approach to people was to reconnect them to God, however they conceived of God. But I knew that there was no way we were going to break the addiction unless we reconnected, made the divine connection strong again, because that's what's going to throw the entities out. That's what's going to end the addiction, and that's what's going to end the craving, because you're being filled up with the Holy Spirit again. So in the course of my work, Dr. Jeremy, you know, I got a traditional degree and I worked at 6 different treatment centers, but some of the most dynamic work I did was on the street, similar to Gus, in that I started something which I called the Reiki Recovery Project, where I used a holistic approach to healing people. What was happening in Santa Barbara, California, and every city in the world probably, is that people would get drunk, they get arrested, they go to the drunk tank, and it's a round robin. It happens again the next day. The police let them out in the morning, they're drunk again, they pick them up the next night, and it goes on and on and on. And there's no solution. I had a great affinity for healing addicts and alcoholics, and both of my parents were alcoholics. So on top of everything else I was going through, my parents were always drinking and passing out and beating us up and all kinds of things. So I had a strong feeling about healing people of this. So what started happening is I started welcoming these street people into my office. I had an office in Santa Barbara. And pretty soon I gained a reputation for healing people. These are street addicts and alcoholics. Some of them had been there 10 years on the streets of Santa Barbara. And most of them were heroin addicts, but some of them were just street alcoholics. And so what started happening is the judges in Santa Barbara started sending them to me because I gained a reputation for healing them completely outside of AA and outside of any treatment facility. So, the program I administered to them was a holistic program, where they had to have 30 days of Reiki treatments. As a Reiki master, what I learned is that Reiki would break the addiction. And every one of my heroin addicts told me the same thing, that Reiki was better than heroin. So once I got them, hooked on Reiki, and then I taught them Reiki 1 and showed them how to heal themselves, they became very interested in that. At the same time, I gave them a lot of good old-fashioned TLC, unconditional mother love. A lot of counseling. They were required to see me every day for 30 days. They were required to go to 90 meetings in 90 days at NA because I believe in the 12-step program. And they were required to give me service because none of them had any money. So, the way you rehabilitate a man on the street is you give him his career back. So I would say to them, okay, you were a gardener, come and dig up my backyard and plant some flowers. Okay, so maybe you were a chef, come over and cook for me. Or if you're a musician, write me a song. That way, in the course of their treatment, they began to do their careers again. And eventually I asked them to give service to the community. But they could never use again. They had to take Reiki from me, and they had to receive it every single day for 30 days. And then I began them on the emotional healing part, which is more expansive, extensive, and dramatic. Because, I could go on for a long time about that. But you asked about the entities. I found that within the first week of them coming to see me, I'd have to give them an exorcism. And I've done dozens of exorcisms. And these are big, strong men. And sometimes the other alcoholics and addicts would come in and they would hold them down because they were always saying, I'm going to kill you. And I'd say, no, you're not. This is, I'm protected by the Holy Spirit. You're leaving, you're going to the light. That's it. This man is free. So I did that for years, Dr. Jeremy, but no one would ever fund me in Santa Barbara. The problem is that nobody wanted to pay for the program. People were happy that I was saving all these guys from the street, but nobody wanted to pay me for it. So that's one thing I wanted to tell you. The second thing, which I think is really important, goes back to your Afghanistan story, is that when I worked in the treatment centers, what I discovered, not in the beginning, but towards the end of my career as a drug and alcohol counselor, I got tired of it, was that the doctors, we get these people clean and sober. They pay $30,000 to come into these programs to get clean and sober, and the doctor was prescribing prescription drug medication for them to go home with. I started challenging that. And I said, so you're giving them Subutex and Seroquel, you're giving them sedatives, you're giving them various different things. These people came here to get clean and sober. They didn't come here to get addicted to sleeping medication and to calming medication and pretty serious medication, Seroquel. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but these were Oxycontin addicts. They were already, the maximum primo prescription drug addicts. They knew how to work the system. The last thing they needed was to be given free rein to go get Seroquel, Subutex, or some other downer to go to sleep at night, and given to them by their treatment facility and their aftercare program. I strongly fought that. And you know what I found out, Dr. Jeremy? Guess what I found out? That at the very top levels of all of the large chain of treatment facilities, they are funded by the federal government to get these people addicted as part of the Big Pharma's program, and it kicks back to Afghanistan and everywhere else where we've got drugs flowing in, that if we can't have them shooting up, then we want them on prescription drug medication. So they were required, the doctors were required. I had a conversation with the doctor there, and I said, why are you giving them prescription drugs? And he said, I have to. They told me it comes from the top. It comes from the federal government, controls all the treatment facilities in the USA. So here we're talking again about the same monster, big pharma, big mafia medical. So it's big dough for them. And what I've been following the money, Dr. Jeremy, and what I discovered is that big pharma is financing these global terror wars. I'm going to say it out loud here. You know, I don't care what they think about me. They're using the $1 trillion cash cow that comes from prescription drug addiction in the United States, which is massive, to fund. These guys are basically mafioso guys. They're drug cartel leaders. And they use that extra cash to fund these terror wars all over the world. That's what's happening. This is a multi-fingered octopus, you know, that we're talking about. And I'm sure you can relate to that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to bring you back to Gus in a minute, but absolutely. We try and make some stark points for people who this information is new to, but you need to understand that the pharmaceutical, so just at the corporate 3D money, logical, follow the money, basic investigative journalism level, before we go off into other subjects that people may have trouble with grasping, the pharmaceutical industry, the 10 pharmaceutical industries in the Fortune 500's combined profits is greater than the other 490 corporations put together. We're talking about money that people cannot possibly comprehend. Now, if you're in that kind of industry, what kind of clients do you need? Well, you need sick ones. And we've been programmed, remember the repetition from birth through early days school. I interviewed the wonderful Susan Teri on the Peace School. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. She's one of my new heroes and a good friend now. But basically, we go to the school, we get programmed, and the tele-live vision is doctors, 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 at many levels of program. But you go to your doctor when you're sick. How do you make people sick? You poison them. How do you poison them without realizing they're being poisoned? Because people, when you look at what you've been putting into your bodies for the last 50, 60 years, you'd be horrified. But anyway, you educate people to be stupid. So they go to their doctors, which aren't doctors. They're legalized drug pushers. Gus is correct, Nazi, because this all came from the Second World War. But they're legalized drug pushers, and they give you more drugs, not found in nature. They're all removed aspects from plants, which then do not operate as they would operate in the organic plant when they've taken something, you know, that's the active part, we take that from it, and you create drug addicts. And it's done deliberately, because if you're going to, if you want to control the mass, which has happened for a long time, is now changing, you must drug them. You must keep them toxic. You must keep them in busyness. You must keep them entertained. Otherwise, they start critically thinking. And God forbid anybody trying to control a mass if they start to critically think again. And I want to hopefully beautifully move this on to Gus, because I've treated so-called addicts of all different types and natures. And there's a reason why the body of our work stems into water, from water. Because I know once we start hydrating them, so this is before we get into anything else of what water really is, once you start hydrating these people, and they are severely dehydrated at cell level and contracted, that's why they need the drugs. They need the drugs to feel anything, because they're so contracted and cut off. But when you start hydrating people and doing what's necessary for the water to start to hold in the body, miracles happen, because these drugs start to feel crap, because they start to see them and feel them as the toxicity are, and they naturally want to stop. So Gus, I know you do far more than just hydrating, but can you, and keep it as brief as you can for this show, can you share, you touched upon it, but can you more specifically share what you did with the water and what you saw and why it was so key in bringing these, well, frankly, toxic at every level, even the spiritual level, human doings back, or the beginnings back into a human being? Can you share that with me, please?
Well, the water is a form of magic. doctor. That's the only way that I can describe it. It is what I have learned throughout my life. My mother used to make it for us at home occasionally, and I learned how to make it myself. Okay, I also trained girls and showed them how to do it themselves because I didn't have time. Working starting at 7 o'clock in the morning and then having to go out at night, it was very difficult for me. I always had bloodshot eyes, and so I had to be quick, you know. So I, I I allowed them to learn that it crystallizes the water. All right, we're capable of doing magic with our hands. Our hands are the ones that bring in all the purity from above, or it's not above, it's from the higher spiritual dimension. All right, from our Creator. I always work in service to Creator. Learn a lot about our Creator. I did translations from Spanish into the English language so that because my heart went out to the people that speak English, that they're missing out on something so beautiful. So I was able to translate something that took me years to translate, and I used it out on the street. I taught the girls what the beauty is of spirituality. I taught them about their personal spiritual guide. I used to confront them in an empathetic manner and say, did you know that you have a personal spiritual guide that's identical to you and is assigned to you for the rest of your life, that have gone through a similar reincarnation as you and succeeded? So now they are your prime source of salvation. Once they become aware of that, then they start to use their guide. And at first, they're like little children. You know, oh, I spoke to my guide and I asked my guide this and that. It's not quite like that. So I had to explain it. And that was how I could add myself to it. But the purified spiritual vibration comes from our Creator's fountain of eternal love. All right? So they're purified. They're from the highest dimension in the spiritual realm. All right? And that's why it works so well. I'm not the only one that knows this around the world. The teaching that I come from, right, is expanded throughout the whole of South America. It has entered the United States from the early 1940s, and it's all over Europe as well. It hasn't reached the Asian countries yet, but it has touched base with the Middle East. Right, Kuwait was the first one, the group of diffusion there. I have mentors that are very evolved, mature and evolved, and I always ask them questions. I'm always curious. They love the fact that I'm curious because they see the child in me and they love to answer my questions about many, many things. All right, so then I bring that knowledge out. It's all about wisdom. You know, you can also introduce the wisdom to people. I also wanted to mention something before we finish, Doctor. I discovered a cure for addiction. All right, as I traveled, you know, I guess in my journey, I was very guided, and once I got into a difficult situation where it was just I was covering 3 streets in Sydney. Isn't it strange how they're triangulated around in a distant from one another? A triangle. Anyway, I got on the internet because I wasn't much of a computer-friendly person. But I started going to an internet cafe, and for 3 months I studied a substance called that I discovered on the internet called ibogaine. The ethnobotanical name of this plant is Tabernanthe iboga. It grows in Cameroon and in those areas in that location. It was used by this tribe and they used to do what's called the Witu tribe, right? So they would do the Butu ritual and be able to speak to their ancestors. That's what they used to use it for. One day, this man, when he was young, he was a university student, he started to travel the world. So he ended up in Africa back in the 1970s. He did the Butu rituals, and he was a heroin addict and a chain smoker. What happened to him is that in the morning he woke up and he wasn't hanging out for the drug anymore. He wasn't craving the cigarette either. It was a spontaneous thing that happened to him. They would, what they do is they slice the banana in half, all right, and place the herb on top of it. They use the root of the herb, right? And so he brought it back into the United States. Of course, it was difficult. He was interviewed by CNN back then, but it was all suppressed. I searched for it on the internet and found one location only around in the whole wide world that was providing it for people in Canada. So this man had all forms of, like you were mentioning, Doctor, the earth provides everything. Our Mother Gaia provides everything that we need to cure whatever happens to you, whatever you're affected by, any disease that may occur. Mother Nature provides the answer for it. All right. So this man had a whole list, a whole range of substances, natural substances in root form, in leaf form, in synthesized form. Like the ibogaine has to be synthesized together with sodium chloride, with chlorine. They add the chlorine to the root after it's been grinded very thin, and then it brings out the potency of it. So I was able to purchase it. It was $800, right, for what they needed. So I would get the girls to give me the money. I'd collect the money for them. They trusted me with their money until they were able to gain $800, and I'd order it myself. What I found is that the postal service blacklisted me. That's how terrible this system is. They were so then I'd have to get the girls to do it in their name with their credit card. What happened is this man was finally closed down, but before he closed down, he was able to franchise his business, and it went into now it's in Belgium. There's a headquarters there. It's called Iboga World, and they provide the same quality ibogaine and some other forms of ibogaine for all kinds of addictions, including methadone, cocaine, speed, etc. All right. So, see, the world provides for us.
Absolutely. Well, that's extraordinary. I'm going to research that, and we'll get that up on Naturally Better TV and where people can contact that. That is, I mean, I had never heard of that before, and each time I interview people, I just feel so privileged to learn these things and these wonderful experiences. Well, wonderful in the sense that they need to be heard so people really start to grasp what's going on. I've also had experiences of postal systems, courier systems, basically every level of authority stopping things that only do good and certainly do no harm from reaching the people. And if you didn't already know it, and I did by that point, you realize the system is absolutely in place to protect the evil. But this is changing, and I want to come on to this now. I'm going to go back. We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to come back to Salini. So Salini, you and Gus and are part now of Global Sovereign Alliance and probably many other wonderful connections, because it's not like we've joined a cult or a group like that. It really is people trying to put a label under a collection or network. And this is the beautiful thing that the internet has brought us, the ability that we haven't had for a very long time, to connect to people all over the planet doing extraordinary work. Could you, in about 5 minutes, share what work you're doing with GSA and what work you're doing now and how people can contact you? Because you're also going to be doing a show on NBTV, correct?
Correct. Yes, I am. My show is called Heal Yourself Now, and I co-host it with Michelle Simpaka. And it's going to be about healing, and it's not going to be simple stuff. I want to talk about the hard stuff, the mental deprogramming, the physical detoxification, the things that Gus talked about, ibogaine. I mean, let's get going with the things that really work and that have been suppressed. I want to talk about things that have been suppressed. You know, part of the reason I'm with Global Sovereign Alliance, Dr. Jeremy, is the fact that you know, I'm blocked a lot of times in the regular system because I'm a very alternative person. I'm also I bring a lot of spiritual healing into my work. So nobody's interested in paying for that, really. I mean, it's better than it used to be, but this is the cutting edge of healing. You and I know that, definitely. So, well, I just published the first thing. I'm going to plug my book, okay? This is my book. Can everybody see it? Is it backwards or is that just me? It's Emerging from the Matrix, healing trauma and ending global enslavement. It's more than that. It's not just healing trauma. There's a lot of information in this book about the matrix and about how we are all, which I call, we're living in a collective trance, a collective traumatic trance. And so it's very traumatic to wake up, Dr. Jeremy. And people get very sick when they wake up, or they have a mental breakdown, or they freak out, and they have to go through huge detoxification, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So in the back of my book here, I have the 22 steps to soul transformation. And I'm going to be teaching, excuse me, I'm going to be teaching workshops on how to wake up and how to transform and how to heal and detox. I have individual clients that I see, and I do Skype sessions for people around the world. I'm currently in Australia, but I'm available to travel and teach if there's enough people to pay my way there and my expenses and everything, you know, anywhere in the world. You know, I'm from the USA. I taught Reiki there for 25 years prior to coming here. So I'm available to teach. I'm available to heal. I also teach a spiritual path of the Divine Mother, using unconditional love and divine energy to heal and to allow yourself to become increasingly compassionate and empathetic. And in doing so, you open the channels and the pathways to divine light. So I do that. And I'm going to be doing the show, and I have a radio show as well. It's called Emerging from the Matrix, the same as my book. It's on intentionradio.com, and it's archived at the moment. I've got so many things going on, I can't do that and the TV show. So I'm actually hoping that we're going to do a little bit more with Global Sovereign Alliance, like another program I'd like to do on philosophies and awakening people, a spiritual program. And I'm hoping that maybe I can help you in the future with your clinics. And that's a dream of mine, Dr. Jeremy, is to have a holistic clinic. I mean, I had a little one in Santa Barbara. It was just me doing everything, you know. And I'm not an MD, but I am a colon hydrotherapist, as well as a counselor and a minister and a Reiki master and all kinds of things. So for those people listening, I can do shamanic healing, Reiki, counseling. I do a lot of shamanic dialogue while I'm doing Reiki, and I do soul regression therapy, and I help people with past lives, and detoxification, mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. So if any of this interests you and you're not in Australia, you can call me and we'll do a Skype session. Or I suggest you get the book, because I can't heal the whole world, so I put it all in here. It's a pretty thick book. It's 542 pages. And I explain the matrix. I explain how to get out. I explain the divinity. And we didn't even talk about alchemy. I'm an alchemist. You know, the only way you're going to heal is to transform the energy within yourself. So, you know, sacred alchemy, that's a whole nother show, Dr. Jeremy, but
Oh, for sure it is. And the people, when you start getting into what I call transmutation, the body is living alchemy completely, and but you've been told a lot of rubbish that it isn't, and it's just a very, very exciting area. That book, I'm going to get that book, and I will look forward to putting it in an ever-growing list of books I haven't managed to read yet, but I'm going to get it. Salini, I'm going to just hand over to Gus, but did you want to say something else?
I forgot to give my contact information. You can reach me at emergingfromthematrix@gmail.com. You can get the book at Amazon.com, at Barnes & Noble, or Balboa Hay House. And you can reach me in Skype at Teri.Apodaca, Teri.Apodaca. I'd be happy to book a Skype session with you.
Sounds great. We'll have all those details on NBTV where this show is posted. Selena, thank you so much for all the work you've done. I've helped so many thousands of people, from super rich to can't put shoes on their feet, and without exception, it's the ones with nothing I've enjoyed helping the most, I have to say. And when I meet other people that have done such tremendous work, unheralded, as you soon will be, and as you should be, for the work you've done, I'm just extremely proud to be a human being again. So thank you for that. Gus, we've just got about a few more minutes. Maybe you can say what you're doing with GSA, and particularly mention the water project, and we'll do a whole show on, the actual water with you, and where you can be contacted.
Doctor, to be honest with you, I haven't settled in yet. I have a few ideas. First of all, I know that I want to apply myself towards healing the waters of our earth again, just like I was doing in the New Earth Nation. We were very successful. We were changing the world. I had a family. We were a family, a loving family that would do a collective meditation, and we would heal the earth. Right? We could feel a spiritual high, a natural high after doing the meditation. So we were aware of the effects that we were causing. Also a star seed. So I would like to apply myself towards awakening some of the star seeds that have lost their way. That some of them are still attached to the religious dogma and ideas that are mystical and fantasies. So I would like to lovingly clarify a few things for them that they're still believing in, and we can't take that to the higher realms. It's very important that we are all together in one thought form. I know that it's difficult for you. Everyone applies their free will, and they choose to believe what they want to believe. However, there is an ultimate truth, and we all need to come together in order for humanity to grow, because that's what we're here for. We're here to change the world for the best. We have to.
We are, and we will do a show on water and stuff, and the significance of basically changing the water. I had one of the book titles I hope to write is called "Wake the Water, Wake the World." And because every drop of water is connected to every drop of water energetically, so when you start blessing and treating water, you're affecting everybody in this physical dimension with it, and the water is absolutely significant in holding the vibration, holding the message. It's a liquid crystal. It's your biological hard drive. It is the element of life in this dimension. And the work that you've all done, and Gus, I mean, if people are watching this You know, I mean this lovingly, but get off your asses and go out and help somebody else. You know, a lot of you do. A lot of you doing a lot of research, watching wonderful things, getting on NBTV, listening to these people, but these people have already gone out there and done extraordinary work under extraordinary difficult circumstances. And as the more I do this, the more I'm aware that there's more of these people that exist. Now the world, if we really want to change the world, we have to start serving each other again willingly. And we can start, and it doesn't have to be grand. It can start with when you come across somebody that needs help, whatever that is, whether it be onto a bus or opening the door, or whatever it is, you know? Start willingly helping them. And this energy grows. That frequency goes on, and they go on to help. And Gus and Salini, and having worked with addicts, it's incredibly challenging sometimes, but Gus to go out there in terrible times and times of night to work with these people, and hopefully one day we may even get some of those women on the show and where they are now in their lives. But I am absolutely humbled by the work you've done. I'm inspired by the work you've done and continue to do. And as I've said, it makes me feel proud to be human again, because as you go through this awakening that many of you listening may be going through or gone through, there's some real lows where you start to give up on humanity. And then hopefully when you watch a show like this, and this is very much what NBTV is about, once again, you see that we have people on this planet that you can be very proud to have come across their path. So Gus, Salini, thank you so much for being on the show this week. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation as much as I have.
It's been a pleasure. It's
Yes.
been a pleasure, Doc.
Talk all night on this stuff. You have to
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, it's entirely my pleasure. You know, once again, thank you to my wonderful invisible Indy, my producer, the co-founder of NBTV, a woman that does unbelievable work behind the scenes, and anyone who works with her is aware of this. And I'm just so blessed to have her in my life and my partner in peace. So this has been Naturally Better TV. I'm Dr. Jeremy. Join me next week and share this show. Be inspired and go out there and look out and look after each other.
Peace.
Thank you.